Interpreting standardized assessment data. Standardized assessments in the United States have always been used to identify the effects of schooling on children, as well as to manage school systems and influence curriculum. These assessments have also been used to inform and assure parents of their child's educational services. Formal written testing began to replace oral testing when American schools changed their mission from servicing the elites to educating the masses. During the mid-19th century, these tests began to use monitor effectiveness of schools in accomplishing their purposes. Over the years, the instruments have changed along with the purpose of assessment. In 1905, Alfred Binet introduced a standardized test of intelligence. During this time, Edward Thorndike also developed a standardized achievement test in arithmetic, handwriting, spelling, drawing, reading, and language ability. By 1930, multiple choice were firmly entrenched in the schools, and in 1965, norm reference tests began to evaluate programs under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Finally, in 2001, under the No Child Left Behind Act, ELL students' achievement is included specifically in the law. No Child Left Behind require that ELLs in grades 3 through 8 take the same state academic contents assessments, but also the following accommodations. 1-year testing exemption in reading and language arts for ELL students new to the country, taking the required exams in their native language, testing accommodations such as small group administration of the test, extra time, dictionaries, and simplified instructions. Also, ELL students must take an annual English language proficiency test. Standardized assessments are developed to measure competency with reading, writing, speaking, or listening. State and federal requirements attempt to ensure that they are administered, scored, and interpreted in standardized ways. These assessments compare individual or group growth toward a standard of achievement. Funding allocation and support is often determined by district scores. States required standardized testing for accountability. The purpose of accountability is to ensure that all students succeed and their needs are being met. Districts use the results of standardized assessments to identify students whose first language is not English. These scores serve as a criteria for determining what services are needed for each learner. They are intended to allow teachers a way to monitor student progress and intervene when needed. Finally, scores from standardized assessments are often used to determine a program's effectiveness and make changes if it isn't meeting the needs of the students. Teachers and administrators must look at all aspects of a student's knowledge rather than one test. If students are only identified by one test, they may get inappropriate instruction. With that in mind, there are some common tests that are used to identify English proficiency, including the Language Assessment Scales, the IDEA Proficiency Test, the Basic Inventory of Natural Language, and the Bilingual Syntax Measure of Listening and Speaking. These proficiency tests are used to determine English proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. These tests help determine if the CLD students can complete work in an ordinary class, and helps teachers set up academic curriculum to fit each student. Unfortunately, many people believe that all students need to go through the same standardized test experience for the evaluation to be fair. In reality, for an assessment of knowledge to be fair, it should be a real test of the specific content instead of an exam that tests students' overall English language proficiency. To make a standardized test fair for English language learners, accommodations need to be made. When CLD students are given accommodations, there is a higher probability their test scores will reflect what they have learned. In addition to advocating for proper accommodation, teachers of ELL students need to be involved in the decision-making process regarding which tests will be used. Tests that are closely aligned with the standards and curriculum will give CLD students a better opportunity to demonstrate what they know. ELL students can advocate for appropriate tests and accommodations by joining testing committees at the school district and state levels. According to the author Coltrane, several accommodations may be provided to English language learner students during the standardized examinations. 1. Timing and breaks. ELLs are given additional time to take the test or given extra time for breaks during the test. 2. Setting. The test is administered to ELLs in a small group or in an alternative location such as an ESL classroom to ensure the students are in a familiar, comfortable environment when they take the test. 3. Presentation. The test administrator is allowed to repeat or explain test items and directions for ELLs or the test may be translated into the student's native language and administered by an ESL or bilingual educator. Lastly, response. EL students may respond to the test items in their native language, or they may dictate their responses to the test administrator. According to Mencken, ELL students are put in a vulnerable position because high-stakes standardized test scores can be instrumental in determining school funding, grade level promotion, graduation eligibility, and ELL student placement and tracking programs. Since standardized tests are written and administered in English, we know this leaves English language learners at a disadvantage. Even with accommodations, the results may not portray what ELLs actually know. Under the current Every Student Succeeds Act legislation, ELL students' scores will not count towards a school rating during their first year in the U.S. It is understandable that schools would not want to include ELL student scores, which could lower their school rank, but this does not benefit CLD students. When ELL students are excluded, their needs can be overlooked in program design and instruction. To gain a more comprehensive, accurate picture of what students have learned, teachers can evaluate their CLD students in additional ways. CLD students should be taking multiple assessments throughout the year, including performance-based or alternative assessment that directly correlate with what they are learning in class. This will give a much more accurate view of student knowledge, skills, and progress than a single standard test score ever could.